'Twas a night before homewarming, and all throughout the house, not a creature was stirring, not even oh, no, there's zero.
It's homewarming! Hello, everyone. Happy homewarming. For everyone who was hoping this would be a cooking video, you won't be getting that. But just for your enjoyment, I do have footage of me dying inside from eating a single pea on a plate. I regret it. It was absolutely disgusting. However, I promised it would be in this video, so, here you go. Enjoy my suffering. With that out of the way, let's go back to. Oh my god. Has it been a year? Well, this video is long overdue, so let's hurry up with this quick little backstory. I was sitting in my room exploring the lovely Welcome Home website on my now dead laptop, rest in peace, and decided, hey, I have the recipe, and I can kind of bake, and so why not make a tutorial on how to do it? Disclaimer, I will state the recipe and what I did, but I made the cupcakes a year ago, so you're better off just going on the website and doing it yourself. Anyways, back to my attempt at explaining this. So I quickly wrote down the recipe and went to the best place to cook any baked good, your grandma's house. Well, it was my grandma's house, but you know, still grandma's house. I quickly learned why it's important to have everything you need before you start. We went to Walmart like 5 times to make sure we had everything, but we still ended up forgetting the yellow cake mix. So we just decided we'd make white cake mix and just dye it yellow. It was basically the same thing. I'm sure there might be a slight flavor difference, but that's about the only difference we made from the original recipe. After we did the actual baking part of making the cupcakes, we got straight into the design. For each cupcake, we decided that we wanted to put a little miniature of each character on the top, but instead of doing full bodies, we just decided to do the heads. This gave us about 4 cupcakes for each character. The first character I made was Wally. Making him out of fondant was pretty easy. You just took a yellow ball, gave it some eyes, some blue fondant on the top to give him a hairline, give him his little side swoopies, give him some ears, and then throw on his cute little cinnamon bun looking pompadour. Even though he kinda looks like he's on substances. It's still Wally. When I was making the cupcakes, I decided that I wanted all of them to be different flavors. Wally was assigned lemon. Now I know what you're thinking. Wally is commonly associated with apples, so why not make him apple cider flavored? Apple cider is a really common drink at Christmas and just overall makes sense. But I didn't have apple cider flavoring at the time, so I just said lemon because Wally is yellow and so are lemons. There was literally no other reasoning behind it other than the fact that that is my reasoning. Now on to who is probably my favorite to make, Mr. Frank Frankly himself. I designed Frank after a cup of hot chocolate. because I feel like he's the type of guy who, when it's nice and cold and snowing out, he doesn't go out and play in the snow and instead sits down and enjoys a nice book with a hot cup of cocoa. I also just really like chocolate, and I wanted a chocolate cupcake in the mix, and Frank felt like the perfect candidate to be turned into a marshmallow. Frank was fairly easy to make. All you had to do was take a bit of frosting and plan out where his facial features would be, stick eyes where the eyes were, and give him a little orange nose. The hair, I believe we did make out of fondant, but you could just take that part off, and it's actually really good. The next and final neighbor I turned into a cupcake was Julie. She was pretty fun to make because I really enjoy peppermint, and I thought of Julie and said, well, she lived in a forest before she went to the neighborhood, and a candy cane forest sounds pretty cool, so we ended up making Julie peppermint flavored. Julie was probably about as simple as Frank when it comes to decorating. We did have to take an extra step and crush some candy canes in the correct shape of a horn four, no, 8 times because we had to do it twice. But they ended up looking really cute in the end, and it was worth it. We did use frosting instead of fondant for her hair, mainly because it looked cooler, and Julie's hair is known for being big and boisterous, and so is frosting. We were also just kind of running out of fondant, and I needed an excuse to not have my entire cupcake covered in fondant. For the actual fondant piece, we just took a slightly pink colored piece of fondant, put a little bit of face sculpt on it, give it a little orange nose, give her the bangs in her horns and her ears, and gave her her eyes. After, we just kind of put on the frosting and called it a day. Now that I've explained what the cupcakes are and how I made them, I'd like to go over a few critiques I had when making them. One thing I would really like to change is the yellow cake mix. I know it was a joke. I dyed it yellow and called it yellow cake mix even though it was white. But I don't know if it actually made it any different considering I've only made these cupcakes once, and if I were to make them again, I would definitely not want to try the yellow instead of the white. The second biggest one would have to be the fondant. And I love fondant. It's really fun to sculpt and make how I want it, and it was really fun to do. However, it took me about like 3 days of just straight sculpting to get all of them done. And by the end of it, it looked really cool. But again, it took 3 days and ended up tasting disgusting. Like, if you've ever had fondant, you know, it's absolutely horrible. The second set of treats we made were the Rice Krispie treats. We made these sometime in September, I believe, of this year, so these were more recent and why this video took so long in the first place. For this recipe, we did have to do a little bit of estimating because on the recipe itself, it only says a package of marshmallows. And if you've ever baked anything before, you know that that is varying in many degrees. So we compared it to similar recipes and got an amount of 8 ounces of marshmallows. However, in my opinion, the Rice Krispies ended up a little bit too crunchy, so I'd recommend 10 ounces, just in case I ever did it again. In the end, I had 11 Rice Krispies, which, as you can tell if you can count, is more than enough to make our neighbors. So I ended up making a lot more Frank and Wally because they were the easiest to make, and Wally's my favorite, and forever will be. I ended up decorating the Rice Krispies with M&Ms and frosting. I used M&Ms because the chocolate tasted good with the Rice Krispies, and it looked better than that. The Rice Krispies were pretty easy and were really fun to make, actually. They took me about a day and were actually way simpler than a lot of people would think. You basically just mix it together and take it out and form it, and then you shove dowels into them. I had to stab Wally like 4 times? How many? Three? Three or The final treat I made was caramel apples. And I will say, these were the hardest. I don't care how long the fondant took. Trying to get the caramel on these apples was harder than anything I think I've done in a long time. We did these October, and they tasted amazing because caramel is delicious. And if you say caramel, Good for you. I don't care. I'm pronouncing it caramel for this video. But it was amazing, but it was so hard to make. The design part was the easy bit. And I will say some of them kind of nightmare fuel. But, it was worth it in the end because we got some delicious caramel tasty treats. To attach the facial features, I decided I would be using cream cheese frosting. Now, I know what you're saying. Zero, what the actual heck is wrong with you? Why would you put frosting on caramel apples? And that is a good question. I scraped all of it off. It was horrid. But, I didn't know that at the time. It was my first time making caramel apples ever. So, it was a learning experience for me. Now, the design elements itself. I used M&Ms for the eyes and on the noses of some of them, while the rest was made up of melted Laffy Taffy or Starbursts. A great example of me melting candy would be on Barnaby's ears or Howdy's antennae. They were pretty easy to make if you can scrape the starbursts off your bowl. That was a pain. But it was pretty fun, and it was actually really good. The candy on the caramel tasted really good, and I would recommend doing it. However, with every good, there does end up having to be a bad. And in this case, the bad just so happens to be, the caramel melted. But instead of melting in like Sadly, that is all the content I have for all of you lovely people today. If you liked today's video, please consider subscribing. It helps me out and encourages me to make more amazing content for all of you. And if you like my welcome home content, please consider watching my live streams where I've gone into the website and talked about it. I also just so happen to have done one with my friend Ziri, who is just now as much as a welcome home fan as probably most of you are. I hope you all have a fantastic home warming, and I will see you again in tonight's live stream. Have a good day.